Well, that's on YouTube. This is Mr. Beat here, and we have a guest tonight for 10 questions that is different, quite different than my other guests I've had on this show so far. Yeah, sorry, I'm slightly late there. Thanks for being here, by the way, everyone in the chat. And also, I'm supposed to always promote my Twitch. I Twitch. I live react to history, economics, and geography content over on Twitch, 9 a.m. On Monday mornings Central Time. Okay, that out of the way. Tonight, I have come up with 10 questions to ask our guest, who is RM Brown. Before I bring RM on, just want to introduce him. He's not considered an edutuber or a history tuber. He's, I guess, kind of a reaction channel of sorts, but and obviously leans to the left politically. That's pretty obvious. But what I really appreciate about his channel, which I stumbled upon it probably about 6 months ago or so, is his use of just quirky, surrealist humor that really just cracks me up. And a lot of the content he reacts to, that he adds context to, is it's pretty cringy right-wing pundits, basically. Most of these pundits who are, they're the grifting variety that like to profit from hate and division. So that's kind of how I stumbled. I think it was probably Ben Shapiro is one of the videos he was reacting to when I first came across him. And thank you, algorithm gods. But anyway, without further ado, give a warm welcome to RM Brown.
Hey, thank you.
I don't have the sound effects like you do.
I know. I wish I could pipe those in somehow, but
that's on YouTube.
That's on YouTube. Oh, yeah. Damn it.
Sniffing. No. Damn it. So, So I'll just randomly say some of your sound bites throughout. Don't worry about that. But yeah, so I want to thank you for. It's funny because when we reached out, I told my significant other, Mrs. Beat, she's the one who actually reached out to you to begin with, and I was like, "Yeah, I heard he's hard to get a hold of. I don't know if you might as well try. What the hey? See if he responds." And you did. So thank you for responding. You seem to be like your channel is starting to catch on, I think, this past year, right? Like,
I think so. It got kind of like in the algorithm really, really heavily in like late 2020, I think. And I got lucky because some people who I follow on YouTube let me come on their show, and that helped too. So yeah, I think it kind of is, people are starting to find it, or people are, it's starting to get discovered again without like the full power of the algorithm, which kind of, I don't know if because a lot of political YouTubers like Kyle Kalinske, they have been speculating that independent news commentary or stuff is a little, they don't want that in the algorithm as much, but who knows, but I've definitely been lucky on YouTube that people have found it.
Yeah. So, I guess that for those of you who's never seen an episode of this, and this is also a podcast too on Spotify. It's called what's this? It's called the Beat Pod, is what we call the podcast. Anyway,
the Beat Pod.
What we did is we came up with 10 open-ended questions to ask each other ahead of time, but we didn't tell each other what we were going to ask. And the idea is that it makes it a better conversation. And so we'll go for at least, we'll probably go for about a couple hours tonight, and try not to get too far off track. And then if we have extra time, it's always kind of fun to like take questions from the audience. I know that there's some folks here that are fans of you. That they're a different breed, the folks who watch you. I guess I'm included. I'm a big fan. Yeah, I was also telling RM here before we started that it's a weird parasocial relationship. Like, RM, you were familiar with me because you stumbled upon my videos before, but I would say I'm more familiar with you. Like, I literally will watch almost every new release you have Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Oh my God. Amazing.
Yeah. So I don't want to make it too awkward, but if people watching notice, like, why does Mr. Beat know so much about this guy? It's kind of creepy. Why is he stalking him? No, I just watch his videos a lot. But
That's
yeah, so
super flattering, especially coming from somebody who's like a real YouTuber with the plaque and all that stuff. It's like I feel like I'm you know, I feel like you know, a real NBA player is saying like, "Hey, you got a pretty good jump shot or something," you know? So it feels
what
good.
I used to play in the NBA as well.
Okay.
No, kidding.
I read about that.
And that's what makes you a real YouTuber, eh? Is that plaque behind me? You'll get one of those soon. Don't worry.
Okay,
You
I'm
will.
working on it.
Okay. So I'll ask my question first to kind of break the ice here.
Nice.
Um,
Okay.
how did you get into all of this? Like, what inspired you to start a YouTube channel and start doing all this?
Um, you know, really just well, is two things. It was that I kind of really started doing uploading videos every day during the pandemic because it was like I had really nothing else to do. I was working from home, and I was like, I don't really have an excuse to not do this every day. So I just started doing it every day, and that's how the algorithm figured out what the content is and then who to give it to, I think. So yeah, it was mostly just a why not kind of thing. That's pretty much it. And the type of content I do is I don't know, it's just that there's so much stupid stuff on there and so much kind of like blatant like you were saying, I thought the lead up was really good. Is like kind of cringy and like really obvious misleading things and stuff like that. So I was just like, this is sort of a no brainer to kind of respond to this stuff, you know?
Yeah, especially I think that I mean, you're not even really political, I notice. Like it's more of just like one of your most common sound effects that you insert when you're reacting is the money sign. And the older I get, the more I realize like we like to pretend that everything's not about money, but it really is. Like everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like, well, it's definitely the thing that's going to motivate you in ways that like you might not even be aware of. Like I was thinking like, you know, in Austin, I was just like talking to somebody out at a restaurant and we were talking about sort of the wealthier side of Austin and you know, we started talking about people who like almost are compulsively accumulating wealth and stuff like that, way more than they need. And, you know, basically they don't have really, you know, like they're really like attached to that. And I think that there's something psychological about that where it's not just like I don't ever want to be broke or poor. It's that I don't even want that to ever be a possibility, you know. I think there's all kinds of psychological things about money that I think we're probably not even aware of that are operating, you know. But of course, like the most obvious ones are right on the surface, and a lot of that we do see in politics and stuff. So, you know, yeah, I think you're right. It's the main motivator.
We're
And
not exempt from it, by the way. Like we're
oh,
not
of
on a high horse because
course
think
not.
about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, like you're more likely to cover Ben Shabino or
yeah,
Ben Shapiro. Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm more likely to cover controversial content because I knew that when I made a video about anti-Semitism that it would do well, and sure enough, it's one of my it has
Mm,
like 5 million, 6 million views.
mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, you kind of have to. I mean, yeah, none of us are exempt from the game, which is why you know I don't know it pokes some holes in actually one of the questions I was going to ask you but related to this. But it pokes some of the holes in the idea of a sort of a any not even a pure meritocracy, but anything that could be considered like a fair meritocracy. If you're because you know a lot of I know I would want to if I had a kid, I would really want to put as much money and resources into that kid that I have, you know. So yeah, I think there's a lot to it that we don't always consider. So yeah, I don't
I
know.
mean, I always say first of all, Satan's in the chat. Thanks for the thank you, Satan.
Yeah, that's kind of nice of Satan. Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, I loved teaching. Like loved being in the classroom with students, and I do miss it from time to time. But I do think it was the right decision to leave the classroom and pursue making videos full time because of the pay. And
Mm-hmm.
what's crazy to me is like when I first started teaching, it was before I had kids, and now I have two daughters. And after I had kids, um, I actually had this overwhelming regret, that I was like, man, I was selfish that I chose a career that I wanted, because I never chose a career for the money. I chose it
Mm-hmm.
because I was passionate and I wanted to do it. But now, crap, I have student loan debt,
Mm.
and I'm not going to be able to pass any wealth down to my children. I won't be able to pay for college for them.
Right. Yep.
So that was I mean, it all worked out because now I'm like a YouTube star, makes millions of dollars. Like I'm up there with Logan Paul now, but uh,
Absolutely. You're selling those NFTs and all this stuff now.
yeah, oh yeah, that's right.
All kind of doing all kind of scams like that. You gotta do it.
Ching, ching,
Gotta do
ching.
it.
Well, go ahead and ask. We can go
Yeah.
ahead and order. What's the question that was adjacent to what you're talking about? Yeah.
I wanted to ask you what as in terms because you're obviously like a very knowledgeable historian, I feel like, and what to you is like the most misunderstood thing about US history, or do you think that there's some this is what sparked my thought, this is what sparked this when you were talking about that, what's a like what do you think is like an American myth, or is there like some foundational American myth or something like, well, I guess the question is like in general, what's the least what's the most misunderstood thing about US history, and is there some persistent myth about the United States?
Yeah, there are quite a few examples, which is partially what got me into history to begin with. Like because I would learn in class about something and then find out about something outside of class and wonder why wasn't I ever taught that? First of all, though, Jorick says that we're too intellectual lightweights, so I guess I'm not smart enough. So maybe I shouldn't answer this question because I'm
Jeez,
not
Jorik.
intellectual.
Yeah. I'm okay. You know what? We'll just take the stream down. Just take the
Yeah, we're
stream
gonna
down.
quit. We're gonna shut down the channel now. No, anyway, the event that I always like, it's pretty much my go-to for a question like that is the Philippine American War. I
Mhm.
feel like this is something, and I actually brought this up when I did a video looking at old textbooks. But it's an event that rarely gets brought up in American history curriculums. It's a lot of times it's lumped together with the Spanish American War. I got to
Right.
ask you, did you learn about the Philippine American War when you were in school?
Definitely not. Definitely not. Nope.
Yeah, I'm going to make a video about it in a few months, but
Yeah, please.
I mean, I understand why it's not brought up much in American history classrooms because the United States government was responsible for atrocities. It The treatment of the Filipino population was horrific in some instances, and I mean there were concentration camps. We had concentration camps, torture. You know, the R word, which if I say that, this live stream will automatically be age restricted. So if you know what the R word is, it's a 4-letter word. That horrible thing. Yeah. So it's something that's whitewashed because it's American troops that were there did horrible things, and then we didn't allow the Filipinos to have independence because that's what they wanted. That's why we were fighting Spain in the Spanish-American War. They assumed that, oh yeah, we would be independent. We wouldn't be controlled by another colonial population afterward, and they were, and they didn't gain their independence until several decades later, and that was after like so many atrocities and yada yada. So that's usually what I bring up. Like, yeah, check it out. It's going to be depressing for you to learn about, but but yeah, I encourage everyone to learn about the Philippine American War.
Hmm. That's
So
a good one. Okay. That's something that it sounds like a lot of, well, a lot of these historical things. I read that book, The Jakarta Method, last year, I think, or maybe whenever it came out, and it's a lot of stuff about Indonesia that I really did not know about. I mean, well, it's sort of like, I kind of maybe knew a little bit about that stuff, but and sort of the CIA and all that stuff, but to the degree to which it's similar to what you were talking about, the degree to which some of this some of this stuff, like how could this how do we not teach this? How do we not know this? This is like a crucial thing to know about history, I feel like. So yeah, it's sort of weird. Definitely my history in high school, I got better instructors and class, in lessons and stuff in college, but in high school we really didn't touch any. I mean, it was a very, whitewashed version of history, especially American history.
I gotta ask. I had never even heard of the Jakarta method. I feel a little embarrassed to say. I guess I am an intellectual lightweight here. I have never heard of that. So, what's like the basic thing that it's
Uh,
about?
I'll actually, I pulled up the because I don't want to like say to my own stupid words, but it's basically about here. I'll just read this: the hidden story of slaughter in Indonesia, Latin America, and around the world, backed by the United States. It's basically about sort of like it's really a lot about anti-communism, sort of Cold War stuff, but really like the CIA doing these kind of secret anti-communist missions, and
Mm.
especially in Indonesia, um, they had a sort of populist president that the U.S., according to this book, I'd like to get your opinion on the book if you ever have time to check it out. But according to this book, they really didn't like this sort of populist leftist leader, and the military did all kinds of terrible things to get involved and make sure that they're to suppress any kind of leftist or communist a movement there. And it gets the same kind of really horrific stuff that you were talking about. There's a couple movies that came out related to it, two documentaries that I cannot remember the name of. I know Werner Herzog produced one or both of them. I can't remember the name, but they're really well made documentaries. But yeah, that's just one thing I did not know about for history. And there's a lot for me as a an intellectual lightweight, like that guy was saying. A lot of this stuff I don't know and need to catch up on.
I have no. Yeah, I would like to read that book. I do own this book. I always recommend it. It's oh gosh, the glare.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Overthrow by Stephen Kinzer.
I've been meaning to read that forever. That's like on my been on my list for a long time.
It's a good read too because Kinzer he has a journalist background. He was a reporter for the New York Times, and so it's much more readable than. No offense, but most historians are really boring with their books.
Mm-hmm.
So I always recommend like journalist accounts. But yeah, like it's all about. There's nothing about. As far as I know, I looked in the index. There's nothing about Jakarta and their Indonesia at all. But there's lots about Latin America,
Yeah.
the shenanigans in the Middle East, and yeah, the CIA was working. I mean, a lot. It's funny too because we blame presidents. I'm kind of known as the president's guy on YouTube here, and I got a lot of comments when I made a video about Dwight Eisenhower, like, oh, all the coups that he was responsible for, Guatemala, Iran, and I always push back a little bit. I'm just like, the president really doesn't have as much control as you think. Like they kind of know what's going on, but a lot of times they're just like, I mean, so I understand like why people get so upset about whatever they think the deep state is. I mean, because the deep state does exist. It's the CIA. There's a lot of secret stuff that goes down, and a lot of it's unethical. So,
well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of. It just seems like a sort of the way that it makes sense to me is there are people who are pretty powerful, and they have they have interests, and they're looking out for the interests of powerful entities in America, and sometimes you may make really you do really terrible things to defend those interests sometimes. At least it seems like that to me, that like quote unquote deep state version of history, which I have other questions about that for you too, by the way.
oh, nice.
Yeah. It just seems like that's the way it made sense to me. And again, I'm learning. I'm always trying to learn about this stuff, but that the deep state isn't it's not like, it's not like a secret society. I think I was actually going to ask you about the Freemasons too, but it's not as much like that as it is like just like big companies that want to maintain cheap labor or whatever, some kind of trade relationship, and they end up doing terrible things to like defend that or something like that. At least that's how it makes sense to me, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Incentives. We respond to incentives. It's that, and as a country, it's all geopolitics, like resources most of the time. And
Exactly, resources. Right. That's what
yeah.
I was trying to grasp for. Yeah.
uh, okay. Before we, somebody, I try to recognize the super chats because they, again,
Of
money.
course.
Cha-ching, cha-ching.
Yeah. I wish we had the sound.
Rick May, thank you very much. What's your opinion on Knowing Better? Well, guess what? Knowing Better is going to do a future episode of this. So he's a friend of mine, and yeah, check him out. Okay, my next question for you, RM, is what was it like? I found out watching you all the time that you grew up in Florida. So what was it like growing up as a Florida man, or I guess if you were Florida boy, Florida man child, whatever you want to call it?
I was in the news a lot as Florida man. That's me. They're talking about me, all that. I love it. I mean, there's a lot that's great about Florida. I always make fun of it and I call it like a terrible state that should be cut off the map and then pushed into, and obviously like the stuff that's going on politically there, you know, in the higher reaches of government is pretty terrible, I think, you know. There's a lot of really sort of I don't know, like hateful stuff that's coming out of, at least to me, you know,
Mhm.
in the government there. So you know, that's sort of what I'm making fun of. But generally, I mean, it's, there's so much of it that's so beautiful. You know, I went all over the state. There's great beaches. You know, it's, the weather is always pretty perfect. So you know, it's a shame about it's a shame about some of the other stuff. But in general, I really liked growing up there, to be honest. Did you grow up in Kansas City? Where did you grow up?
I grew up by Wichita.
Okay.
Shout out to Augusta, Kansas. Yeah, it's South Central Kansas.
Okay, got it. Do you like
What
Kansas?
part of Florida?
Oh, I grew up mostly in Miami.
Oh, Miami, of course.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
part.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, what were you saying that? What were you asking?
Oh, I was gonna ask you if you like living in Kansas. I've only like kind of
Oh,
spent short amounts of time in Kansas. It seems pretty nice.
impressive that you've been here. Yeah, no, it's usually, I mean, it's known as a flyover state for good reason, but I do, it has a certain charm for sure. I think I do like the fact that I like wide open spaces, and uh, it's nice to kind of have space here. There's just less people.
Oh
But
yeah.
at the same time, there's not a lot of history here other than Bleeding Kansas, that all that. And I live in a part of the state where there was a lot of violence during the 1850s for sure. But other than that, not a lot of history. And then, of course, I like mountains, and there's no mountains near here at all. A lot of people don't realize that the Rocky Mountains used to be in Kansas. Then Colorado stole them from us.
Mm.
But that's like, people also don't realize that Kansas is like, it takes like 8.5 hours to drive across the state from corner to corner. If you to go, it's a big state. So
Mm. Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
Should I ask you another question? I have some pretty good ones in here. Not to show off, but I do have some pretty good ones in here.
go ahead.
Yeah, here we go. This is probably the one that I might be most interested in. But did you see? I think you're interested in JFK, right? It seems like,
Absolutely.
okay. Did you see that new stuff that came out that seems like there's some, I don't know, revelations about the assassination? Okay, that's the first question. Did you see that? And second of all, what's your opinion in general about that assassination in that time period and all
I'm
that?
gonna get myself in trouble here. I'm a bit controversial on this because,
Yeah.
okay, I will preface this by saying that I did when I was younger. Well,
Mhm.
first of all, I grew up very religious, and then when I was older, I replaced religion with conspiracy theories.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a good one. It's a good religion. Conspiracy theories.
yeah, they go. I mean, I say the same thing about ideology. Like, ideology can be like a religion, but you
Yeah.
just kind of go all in and you're uncritical with it. Uh,
Yes, I believe that too.
so like even 9/11, like I was like, this would have been like 2005 or 2006. I was like kind of going deep in, but I eventually got out of all the conspiracies once I, learned more information.
Hmm.
The one that I never fully got out of, though, was the JFK assassination conspiracy theories. I don't have any assertions that I know what happened.
Mm.
I don't think most researchers that look into this stuff do either. Yeah. But, you know, there's a lot we don't know. And I think that there are red flags because I've been following it. Like they didn't declassify everything and they were supposed to. It was supposed to happen this past year and they didn't do it. And some of
Weird.
the stuff they're leaving out uh, does make the CIA look like, oh, maybe they were involved. Maybe they knew Lee Harvey Oswald quite well.
Yeah,
Maybe they were working with him.
that was one of the big revelations that they kind of did know old Lee Harvey Oswald. That's interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm planning on making a video about the JFK assassination. I'm going to try to make it balanced and bring in as many sources as I can. Like because I I've shifted more to the direction of like lone gunmen in recent years, but still I can't fully go there because it just is such a freak thing, like the whole magic bullet theory never sat. I mean, I know theoretically the magic bullet theory, it could happen. Yes. Okay.
Mhm.
I've conceded that. But wouldn't there be like, I don't know, if you look at other evidence that's there, it just seems like it ends up leaving more questions than answers. And if you keep hiding information, even all these years later, and I get why
Something's
they do. Ever
yeah.
since Nixon screwed it up for everyone. But ever
Yeah.
since Nixon, we haven't. Well, maybe ever since the JFK assassination, but especially after Nixon, generally Americans just don't trust government anymore. And that's what led to Reagan.
Yeah.
Like big reason. Like uh, government just wastes our money. We can't trust them with our taxes, and then
Mhm.
they're hiding secrets from us. Like the church committee was. It was awesome, but it also kind of permanently put out there like, yeah, they were up to the deep state was up to stuff, and
That's
they better
yeah.
never do it again. But we know
Yeah.
they're still doing crap.
Right. And people have a lot of problems with the church committee in terms of like, oh, like the people that were running it are part of the, there's a lot of stuff that comes up with that too. That people think that like it never really got a fair or real investigation.
Well, what's
So
your opinion about the JFK assassination?
I don't. For a while, I read that book, The Devil's Chessboard. I think what I would really say is I don't know. There's definitely a lot of fishy stuff about it. Obviously, for people living that time during that time, it was probably a horrific, traumatic thing. So I don't like to make
Yeah,
too much of a goof about it. But the Devil's Chessboard theory is basically that I don't know if you read any of that book, but it's
no,
basically like he thinks the Dulles brothers were
yeah,
behind everything,
they were
and that
shady.
they are extremely sketchy characters, and the idea that it was basically a ruling class turf war of some kind of resonates with me a little bit. But again, we'll never know, and it all sort of amounts to creative fiction, creative
Yeah,
nonfiction, creative nonfiction in the end because it's there's so much that you kind of have to speculate on. But that guy did dig up some things that indicate a lot of animosity. And also, I don't know what you think of this, but that whole thing when you go through it and you watch it and you watch that there's like multiple assassinations, it feels like people that are think they can get away with anything. If this were a conspiracy, people could get away with anything and have a lot of resources to get people to do stuff. That's the convincing part to me. But again, in the end, I don't think we'll at least maybe I don't know, we might never really have really conclusive proof of anything.
yeah,
So
we call that conjecture, and it's fun to speculate. But yeah, you're right.
yeah.
But the '60s being so turbulent, you mentioned all the assassinations during the '60s. A lot of times, these assassinations were of figures who were very popular with the
Yeah.
people. Actually, Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the least popular of the people assassinated because he was pretty controversial at the time of his assassination. But
Oh yeah.
Robert Kennedy,
Mm.
extremely popular. John F. Kennedy was, I would say, pretty popular. Um, Even somebody like people that united. Like I always bring up Fred Hampton. Do you know who Fred Hampton was?
Yeah, Fred Hampton,
With
the
the Black Panthers.
Black Panthers leader. Yeah.
The more I learn about him, the more I was like, he's actually a pretty uniting figure. He united, uh, lower class folks from all racial background, and we saw what happened to him. He was, it was not, there was nothing. It was pretty
Yeah.
obvious, and so yeah, like I just feel like they after well that's one of the benefits I guess after Nixon is
Hmm.
that because of the cynicism now they know they can't get away, like like if the deep state tried to murder Trump for example,
Hmm.
holy crap, like if Trump died in a mysterious way, especially like 2 or 3 years ago, there would have been people like just storming the Pentagon or something, I don't know.
Yeah, things I that then now that's an interesting historical, what do they call, like a counterfactual or whatever
Alt
to,
history,
yeah,
yeah.
alt history to think about is what if what if they took Trump out? What would it, wow.
I
Can't
mean,
def
they make martyrs out of him now, so that you can't
Yes,
you can't do that anymore.
absolutely.
Uh, anyway, I got a couple super chat. Thank you, Alex. Which state is the biggest meme state, Florida or Ohio? What do you think?
They're probably about equal, right? What are the Ohio memes? I can't remember. I know there's a lot of goofs on Ohio.
I say Florida more. It just
Yeah.
the whole armpit thing of
Yeah.
America kind of has good memeability.
Yeah, I always liked Bugs Bunny sawing off the state of Florida and it drifts off.
Yeah. Do you agree with this assertion here by TM White? Thank you for that. Is Florida so messed up because of the state's capital location being so far from the majority of its citizens?
It could be. Yeah, that could be it. I mean, there is it's a weird state in a lot of ways because it has well, where I grew up has a very interesting political mix, that it took me a while, like especially when you're young, to figure out what's going on there because there's a lot of Cuban Americans, and Cuban Americans a lot of the time lean sort of right politically,
Hmm.
and that's kind of interesting. And they're I remember them being very anti-Cuban government and anti-communist and anti-Castro and all that stuff.
But it's
Um,
mostly on economic issues, though, right? Like social issues, kind of more moderate, right?
Yeah, I think it because yeah, okay, so I could speculate on that, but yeah, pretty economically conservative, and yeah, kind of, yeah, I think you're right, kind of a little bit more socially liberal. Yeah, I think that's fair to say in general as a generalization.
And then you have Jacksonville. It's just like so different than
Oh yeah.
Miami or even Tampa. Like
Well,
it's
the yes, exactly. The rest of it is totally, totally different than
like the
Miami.
further north you go, the more south you get is the saying.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. That's a perfect way to put it.
Emperor Tiger Stars here. Looks like he was aware of you from the Sam Cedar. You were on Sam Cedar's Majority Report. What was your favorite moment from that?
I'm just so, because I really didn't sleep well the night before because I was kind of excited about it, because I've been literally watching him from the like first day that he was on FM radio, and so
Wow.
it's like, yeah, it's like meeting a hero sort of, or somebody that I've really, like you were talking about the parasocial relationship. It just happened that way where there wasn't a lot of that kind of mainstream, sort of like entertaining content, but also covering day-to-day news stuff. Um, and so like I always like really paid attention to his show. And so like my favorite moment, I guess, is like, I don't know, we were making fun of we were making fun of Dave Rubin, I think, at one point. But I was like really cringing. I didn't want to watch it because I was like, what if I embarrass myself, or what if I slowed down the show? What if I look stupid on the show? but I think it actually went pretty well, and I think they generally liked having me on, so I consider it a success, I guess, you know. So
I gotta
as a
say, you're
yeah.
embarrassing yourself right now, and you're really slowing down my show.
I know.
So,
So, well, that's obvious. That's obvious. There's no redeeming this one.
no,
It's over.
you're doing
But you,
fine. You're doing fine.
but you too. I mean, you're obviously like a legend on YouTube, so I don't need to even say that. You know.
You're just being nice. Uh, thank you, John. Check out John Malone's podcast. I was on there, and he has a something to check out about. We were back on the JFK assassination.
Yeah. Huh. Huh.
Yeah. All right, but anyway, we got to move on here. So I
Yeah.
really like this next question.
All right.
See if you understand the inside joke reference. Okay.
Okay. Let's see.
Do you feel as if there's a spiritual component to what you do?
Oh my God. Is that oh, don't tell me, don't tell me, don't tell me. That's Tucker. That's
Yes,
Tucker. Yeah, that's
Tucker.
Tucker.
He
That's
was he asked
well,
that
he
to the libs of TikTok
yes, yes.
Twitter account
He
person.
yeah, so I watched that. I watched that and I watched him talking to Charlie Kirk too. And he is really like he has sort of mastered or really taken on this. I don't know what you would call it. Maybe he's always done this, you know, but he was a little bit more of like an entertainment guy, an entertainment reporter. Like he interviewed, I always bring up the Britney Spears interview that he did, but he's kind of come up with this way of speaking that's like that he's like a public intellectual or something, you know, and he'll say stuff like that, like a spiritual component, you know, he'll talk about like the elites and all this stuff, and it's almost like it's just bizarre. It's really weird. It's weird to hear somebody who doesn't really believe anything, you know, except for like probably tricking people on Fox News to speak in this intellectual way. I don't know. Maybe he does believe this stuff. Who knows? But it's bizarre. He just has such a bizarre way of speaking. I don't know if you've seen any of that.
Well, it's so it's nothing of substance is the irony of that, because
That's
it's like
what. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because it's like I guess it's pseudo I can't even say the word right now.
Pseudo intelligentsia.
There we go. Thank you for saving me on that one.
If that even makes any sense, I don't know.
I mean, it's same thing with Jordan Peterson. Like he uses really big words and colorful language, and I used to actually when he first broke through on Joe Rogan, I was like, oh, this guy's profound. And then like over time, I just started really listening to him, like writing down, okay, this is what he said, and dissecting it and evaluating it. And I was like, he's not saying anything. Like he spent 30 minutes saying one thing. I could summarize what he said in 30 minutes in one sentence.
Absolutely.
And that is hierarchies are good. That's mostly what he says all the time. Hierarchies are good.
What I've discovered is hierarchies are good unless they apply to him. Then there's something to get really mad about, especially if it's like now he's in some fight with the board. It's like a kind of like a board that regulates licensing for therapists, so, psychologists in Canada, and they've been seeing him get into these weird, bizarre things, saying really inappropriate things to people, especially if you're a professional of that sort, to be saying this stuff so publicly. If he was maybe a little bit less famous and he was every once in a while said something off color, don't pull the guy's license, I would say. But,
right.
I mean, it's such high profile and it's such, kind of terrible and nasty and mean stuff that they want him to, they're not even going to take his license. They asked him to do a social media training course in order to keep his license. And he is going on how terrible this is. And it's like, well, if that were my job, I would have to fall in line and do that, and you would, and Jordan Peterson would say, that's part of being an adult and that's part of the hierarchy. When it happens to him, no, then it doesn't apply, and you go off and you pop off on Twitter and all this. So it's not very convincing to me anymore. But, I will say, like, there's not, I don't think there's any figure where everything they say is false. Like, he has things that are useful, and I think they could even
Mm,
be, I mean, just self-help stuff or whatever. And,
exactly.
yeah, and, I mean, learning about the Bible, reading into the Bible is probably good. I mean, at least to know what's in there, even if you're not religious. And he's always talking about the Bible and all this stuff. And, I mean, it's not all bad, but the bad is, to me, is so bad that it's like, it's totally disqualifying, but that's just
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Uh, I think it's your turn to ask a question.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
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 Okay, let me see here. Um I kind of want to go out of order a little bit. Oh yeah,
Mm.
I'm actually interested. Who's your favorite historian or history writer,
Oh,
if you have one?
actually, I know I'll probably get made fun of for this as well, but David McCullough is really good.
Oh, all right.
That's
Okay.
he. I always bring up his book about Truman, which is behind me as well. Um, that because it changed my mind on Truman, but he's also just a really engaging writer.
Okay.
Um, I like Stephen Ambrose as well. That's who I got into when I was younger. Um, yeah, so I mean, I obviously lean. I'm more interested in political history, especially presidential history. That's my thing.
Mhm.
Uh, but I'm sure, yeah, like you probably would be into a lot of that stuff because you're into politics. Yeah. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, and history, especially like US history, getting a real feel for what has driven US history is always super interesting to me.
yeah. I mean, it really does rhyme. I mean, it's you. The bad thing about history, though, is all the humanities, all the social studies, is that they're not a perfect science. And so,
Mhm.
like with the hard sciences, you have the power, in many cases, to predict the future, which is
Mhm.
amazing. Like people
Yeah.
don't think about that enough. Whereas the social sciences, you're like, okay, this looks like a demagogue. This guy's kind of like Mussolini, but he's not quite like Mussolini. So I don't know how this is going to go exactly. And it's because humans are so more, you can't predict their behavior as well. There's
Mhm.
general things like, yeah, people fall for demagogues. Yeah. But how are and then the butterfly effect, like the unintended consequences, like, oh, I didn't see that come. Like it took me completely by surprise when Russia invaded Ukraine. And most historians
Me
it did as
too.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I mean, even knowing the full history, you're just like, that idiot did it.
Guys, yeah, yeah, wow. I don't think, I mean, that's a tough one to predict because that is an insane thing to do, So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a rough one.
Thank you, Marcus, for the support. And it looks like, oh, 10 minutes. Oh, that's a reference to someone else. Okay. Uh, Harrison, thank you. Good to see you here. Jordan Peterson doesn't say anything. He bloviates for 4 hours to say something. Jonathan Haidt could have said in 30. I love Jonathan Haidt, by the way. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, I've watched some of his stuff, but I don't know as much about him. Um, I'm gonna look into him more. I know he's a pretty popular figure I see him on YouTube all the time. So yeah, definitely somebody I'm gonna try to look into more.
This person's asking who would be a better president, Newsom or DeSantis. I probably would assume you say Newsom.
I mean,
I mean, Newsom's
yeah,
not that good either.
yeah, Newsom's not great either. I mean, our choices aren't really inspiring,
Oh,
but
that sounds like almost every election.
right,
We
exactly.
got lesser of two evils here. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, pretty convenient how that works. But yeah, DeSantis is really, I mean, I think a lot of people are predicting that he could be the next president. He's a pretty crazy guy. I don't know. I mean, Joe Rogan has been talking about him a lot. A lot of people who almost like represent, I don't know, some version of the typical voter seem to be into him too, it's bizarre, really
Well, it's
bizarre.
just proof that like if they're good at communicating, they can get
Mhm.
elected. I mean, it's not about substance or their ability to lead. It's just like, I mean, he's good at marketing himself, and he knows when to not say something. And then when he does say something, he touches all the woke. He uses that word a lot. what you
Yeah.
like, we're not going to let the woke mob, do this to you, and fear-based and all that. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. I mean, that's his whole thing, is just sort of these culture war things that that really, I did a video about this, that they really are such thin scams. Like, he was doing this thing where he was going to he did this actually more recently, but it's a reheating of the same thing, which is that he's gonna investigate a Christmas drag show. Okay, so it's a drag show. I mean, they've been around forever, and it's a Christmas one, and I think it's 18 and up to go, unless you want to bring you're a parent and you want to bring your kid to this Christmas drag show. That's your uh, uh, supposedly that's your choice as a parent. Literally nothing. There's nothing even remotely illegal about it at all. But he's going to do he's going to spend money on investigating this Christmas drag show. And he did this with a restaurant that did drag shows too. And he's like, we're going to shut this place down, and it's still open. They still do. It's just it's a press con. Like, he'll do these press conferences, and that's as far as it goes.
But people probably think it's shut down, and they think there's
Exactly.
more
Exactly.
drag shows. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I got a good question for this next one. You're going to like this one.
Oh, heck yeah.
So I have this weird theory. I don't want to give you my theory yet. I want to see what yours is. Are folks like Glenn Greenwald, Brett Weinstein, is it Stein or Steen? Always mix whatever.
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard, Jimmy Dore, Matt Taibbi, Russell Brand. Are they just grifting over the past couple years, or are they actually playing a secret long-term game to get more people to the left end of the spectrum?
I'm a little skeptical about the long game theory. It could
Yeah.
be. It could be. I definitely had that thought. I mean, they're not, like, I don't think Glenn Greenwald is a stupid guy. He seems like a pretty smart and pretty savvy guy. What it feels like to me is that they've become a sort of cyborg, which is that they are a part of all of our brains is on the internet, and it responds very directly to things like following and subscribers, and all these payment platforms like Patreon, and all this stuff. You want to see, like we were
Substack.
talking Substack, like you were talking about, like, because we depend on that. Like, Glenn Greenwald has a family, so I'm sympathetic to that stuff. Like, people need to grow their followings, and I think there's part of it where you can expand your audience by sort of compromising what you might really believe. And to me, it strikes me as a sort of a goofy version of a cyborg, where it's like, part of you is like responding to this, like, appendage, of your following. So it's I think, if I had to guess, that would be what it is. Especially Tulsi is immediately went into hosting the Tucker Carlson Tonight Show. So there was a big incentive there to kind of maybe compromise what she might or might not really believe. So that's what I think it is. I think it's just about a following. It's about trying to get the most people in, or maybe go try to get a right-wing audience. I think basically that's what it is. But who knows? Maybe it is some. Maybe it is. I really doubt it, but maybe it is some secret long game. Who knows?
No, that's a good analysis. I kind of, part of me wants to believe that it's part of their, like, especially Jimmy Dore, because I know Jimmy Dore, he's passionate about, like, for example, universal health care. I would guarantee all those people I mentioned are for universal health care, and I am too, by the way.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And so, like, but they just don't bring it up. They don't they'll bring up Joe Biden for not letting people who are pro universal health care, like, have their voice heard by him. But they will, it's almost, they compartmentalize all of that. They just ignore the stuff they know that the right-wing audience will not like. They just don't bring it up.
Right.
And they'll just bring up, vaccines,
Right.
like, be skeptical. And so, yeah, I agree with you that obviously it's more financially, I mean, there's a reason why, I mean, those on the left, let's take Kyle Kalinske, who I watch him sometimes as well.
Mhm.
He doesn't have the audience like a
Right.
lot of those folks, and it's mostly because he doesn't have the money. It's not like you're seeing billboards like Tim Pool does, a billboard in Times Square to promote his stuff. Like, uh,
Mhm.
if you tend to have a left wing show, you just don't have the financial opportunities as much. And so I think part of it's probably maybe both. Like they know that they have to like cater to a right wing audience, but
Yeah.
at the same time they don't have to give up their left wing views, because I think a lot of them still have left wing views.
Mhm. Yeah, they can just sort of shift the focus a little bit.
Yeah.
And that and I but I think a lot of them, like Tim Pool's kind of, he's a wacky character, but he's kind of interesting in that he seems to wanna not feel like he's selling out or something like that, because he will kind of like hint at that he's some kind of a progressive, or he's on the left side of the political spectrum somehow or whatever. But and to me that always felt like a some kind of a wanting to have some foot staying in reality when you're making this content or something. It's a tough one. It's a tough one to read because there's incentives, and people compromise. So, it's yeah,
But
it's a
every thumbnail title of his is like "the left" or "the
yeah,
woke mob is ruining your life."
exactly.
And yeah, but then like he'll just randomly say, "I'm not saying they're right," but then like actually Timba on Toast, the YouTube channel. Have you heard of Timba on
Yeah,
Toast? Yeah,
yeah.
he did a great series of videos on Tim Pool breaking it down, because I fell for Tim Pool when I first came across. I was like, "Oh, this guy is a centrist. I like centrists."
Yeah.
And I had friends too. They're like, "Oh yeah, he seems pretty balanced." I'm like, "No, no, it's both sidesism. That's what it is."
Absolutely. Yeah, and he pushes a lot of, like, really bizarre, social conservative, kind of like anti-LGBTQ stuff. He gets he'll just whichever way the wind is blowing on sort of that version of political YouTube, he'll go with it. And he'll read stories from terribly skewed sources,
Will he
and
read the stories? He'll read like the headline, maybe.
yeah, read the headline. Yeah. His sources are typically, and you're never gonna get like a deep analysis from Tim Pool on like what's going on in the world either. So I'm not sure what people are even getting out of it. But besides, it's sort of just a lot of weird, sort of socially conservative stuff. So yeah, I don't know. That's what I've always gotten from him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let
oh,
me
okay. It's
can
your
I
turn.
do okay, yeah, it's my turn, yeah. So you watched yeah, I think it is how I found you on YouTube, that, 7 hours of PragerU. I was wondering if you had because there's a lot of rewriting of history or giving it a different, let's just call it an alternative view of history in some of those videos. What do you have anything that really stuck out to you in those videos that was like, this might be the most egregious claim that they're making or assertion or whatever?
The There were a lot, to be honest. I mean, but also that's important. Like you were saying about Jordan Peterson earlier. There were some parts of the videos that were good, that were
Yeah.
historically accurate. They were doing their best, and then it's funny because sometimes PragerU will release a good video randomly. I'm like, dang, good job! Like they have a video about critical thinking, I think,
Yeah.
and I was like, wow, spot on. And then
Yeah.
they just released another video that totally ignores the other one that they just released. But yeah, the one that stands out, I think, a lot for a lot of us history tubers, that because
Mhm.
I know, shout out to the cynical historian as well who did a reaction to it. The Candace Owens video where she's talking about, well, it was we black people can thank white people for ending slavery, and that's type of deal. And
I remember that one, yeah.
yeah, that was the first one I reacted to, and it was pretty like it was jarring how bad it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to pause it every few seconds and just say, and then it didn't mean that I had deep knowledge of the topic. I mean,
Mhm.
I taught world history to high schoolers. I'm not going to know every last thing about the history of slavery in the world, but I do know that some of like basic facts that I teach to as part of the curriculum, she was getting wrong.
Mhm. Yep.
And then like making they like to really make Columbus seem like a hero for some reason.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's like I don't know. He obviously there's nuance there, and he's a complicated figure, but the agenda of it. I also did a video about the Southern strategy. Are you aware of what the Southern strategy? Okay, yeah. So
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the most important parts of modern US history probably.
yeah. So basically, if you don't know what the Southern strategy is, it's the realization by the Republican Party that they needed to shift who they catered to because they were losing voters to certain demographics, and so they focused heavily on the South, like converting Southern voters, and they kind of tapped into the subtle racism that still existed post the civil rights era.
Mhm.
And so yeah, like that's that's why you go back to the 1920s, or actually I should say 1930s, when Franklin Roosevelt was president. The South was mostly still voting Democrat, and
Mhm.
now by the 1990s they were mostly voting for Republicans. That shift, what fascinates me more than anything is like PragerU and Dinesh D'Souza as well as part of this. They are so ideological on this. Like they will, it's all cherry picking. So what
Yep.
they do is they like, okay, my mind's already made up that Democrats have always been the racist party,
Right.
and then they will just go and they'll find any evidence from the past that
Mhm.
makes the Democrats of the past look racist, which everybody looks racist in the past. Everybody was
Mhm.
racist in the past almost.
Yeah.
So like I mean, and that's typically how they frame it. And with my video I made about that, I was trying to add nuance as well because uh, some people on the left were getting it wrong as well.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the agenda, that's what we as historians we really want to. I don't consider myself a historian, but history teachers in general, like your own biases, you've got to recognize that that's guiding your interpretations here. And when somebody has an agenda, that's I don't know if you can believe anything they say because they're going to frame it. They're going to use logical fallacies to frame anything they want, and that will make it so that you agree with them. Like
Yeah.
you're not going to get any. I mean, you might be getting the truth.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's a
Yeah.
gamble.
Good. Have you ever read any of those Rick Perlstein books like Nixon Land
No.
or that's for the kind of like the Southern strategy type stuff. Nixon Land is a really good book because it's like a beat by beat, um, like kind of what was going on with Nixon and the lead up to Nixon's run and all that stuff. It's really, really, I would recommend. I mean, he's one of maybe my favorite history writers. He wrote, a lot. I think he wrote a newer one that I've been reading about Reagan, called Reagan Land, and then there was another one called The Invisible Bridge, and then he did one about Barry Goldwater. It's pretty good. He's very like meticulous. Like you feel like you're there. So his stuff is pretty interesting. If anybody wants to check that out,
Definitely.
yeah.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, Nixon Land.
We're giving each other homework here
I know. I
tonight.
got overthrow down here. I got look more into the Philippine American War. I got it. I got it all down. And I think it's my. Is it my turn? Is it my turn or is it? I can't remember.
Oh
I
gosh,
think
I
I
think it's
think I
my turn.
asked.
I was just
Yeah.
way too long with my answer. I'll shorten it from here on out. Okay.
No, 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 no problem.
All right. This is related to my last question. And I know you react to a lot of content, like quite a variety, actually. A channel like this last video you just did, where the girl was on the whiteboard talking about why birth control. I was like, who? I didn't never even heard of her before, but I just want to like of all the content you react to,
Mhm.
like who are the true believers and who are just grifters? I know probably most of them are mostly grifting, but
Mm.
some of them, like I get the vibe that someone like Ben Shapiro truly believes most of what he says. Do you agree with that? Or
Well, yeah, I think so. It's also interesting because like belief is a complicated thing because
Yeah.
like a lot of our beliefs, they could come from a traumatic event. They could come from things that happen in our childhood that kind of skew the way we look at the world. So belief is kind of a tough one in general, but I think he probably does believe a lot of that stuff, but he also has a lot of incentives. I mean, he's he the way that he talks about, for example, the fossil fuel industry, he has some conflicts of interest there. I think,
You wanna explain that to the audience who probably doesn't realize that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of this kind of stuff, where Um, you know, I'll put it this way, you could it's very easy to find this information, but in general, some of these, media organizations get a lot of money from the fossil fuel industry. In the Daily Wire's case, I think they're directly, they have these direct connections to these. Actually, Vice did a big kind of a story about this that went under the radar a little bit. You could maybe look into that. But yeah, it's if you're taking millions of dollars from fossil fuel billionaires, I think it's probably going to be against your interest to say things they might not like. So yeah, that's part of the problem too. Somebody like Candace Owens, I think, is just purely because she
Mm.
she was doing content that was like liberal, like more like center left or something before. She was doing like anti-Trump stuff or something like that before she was like a full-on conservative. So a lot of the time, I think somebody like her probably not a true believer about any of that, anything political. So
Mm.
I mean, yeah, it's Tim Pool probably not. He just knows that there's a big audience for that stuff. I really do. I wonder like who there's a guy named Glenn Lowry who I was listening to a debate with him in this Marxist professor named Richard Wolff, and they were,
Mm.
the one guy's a Marxist, the other guy's a sort of kind of a Republican-y type guy, and I think he might be more close to what a true believer is, maybe on the conservative side, because he's a I think he either is or was a professor at some big college somewhere. Can't remember which one, but like I think he really is. He's just like sort of an old school, um, you know, uh, like he kind of believes in sort of conservative economics kind of thing. But it
Mm.
is actually that interesting. That interview is interesting because he kind of conceded at one point that America would be better off as a social democracy, like a Nordic style, big welfare state, lots of public ownership thing,
He
even though
conceded that he
he
conceded that?
conceded that. He conceded
Wow.
that. He conceded that. I think the problem that he had was some kind of revolutionary, totally taking apart capitalism. That's his problem. But he did concede. He kind of conceded. I'm interested if any of your fans or if you go back and watch that
I'm gonna
debate.
find this right now.
Yeah,
It's
it's toward the end where he's like, from what I remember, he was just like, yeah, I think we could. That seems pretty good. We could do that. It's Glenn Lowry and Richard Wolff, which is it's sort of interesting because that's one of the big. I mean, that's one of the big like I don't know hinge like focal points or like pressure points or whatever of politics right now is like the Bernie Sanders side versus the whatever the right wing quote unquote populist side, and he's kind of conceding to the Bernie Sanders side. So that's kind of interesting.
I think this is it here.
That's it. Capitalism versus
I'll
socialism.
have to check
Glenn.
that out later.
Yeah, yeah. If you can find that part, I believe it's like maybe 3/4 of the way in. He's kind of just like, yeah, this because it's very hard, I think. And I watch. There's a guy. Well, there's a couple people I watch who talk about how economics works in that part of the world, and it's hard to be like, oh, things are totally falling apart when you have a big welfare state or whatever, because it's clearly not. It's like it
Mm.
actually seems to be working quite well. So even that's why maybe I'd throw him in the true believer category, because he's just like he's kind of like he's like, it seems like, he's like, it seems to me that conservative economics works better, but then he has an example of maybe that's not true, and he goes with it. So yeah. Oh, I like this too, that he had his wife moderate it. I think it's really cute. I think it's,
I love this stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
And Richard Wolff, I saw another debate with him that he did about this same topic I think it was hosted by Reason
I think,
magazine.
yep, he does that a lot. He does
Yeah,
that a lot.
it's
He's
great.
an interesting character because he has all the Ivy League degrees, and he's he's a Marxist, so he's not they can't really pin him with the, like, he doesn't know he doesn't understand how economics works. So he's always an interesting volatile a volatile element to throw into the mix,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Giving each other lots of stuff to check out. I love it.
Absolutely.
Um,
It's funny because a lot of these questions, I wrote them down. I was like, this will be good. And I'm like, some of these are pretty boring. I don't think he's going to
it's
like these.
okay. Well, what's the next one you got?
I was just actually, this one, it might be fun. Who's the worst figure in U.S. history?
Oh, so not
Who's
president, just figure, period.
it could be a president, or just
Ooh.
who do you think is caused the most harm, most evil, something like that.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I know a lot of a pretty common one would be like Andrew Johnson, maybe, right?
Okay.
Does he come up like
Yeah.
Reconstruction failure stuff and all that?
Yeah, I mean, because, well, yeah, but he didn't have as much power because he was up against a Congress that was overwhelmingly against him, and
Mm-hmm.
they were one vote away from kicking him out of office with their impeachment trial. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I wouldn't say as far as impact, you could even say someone like John Calhoun was more of a negative impact. He came before as he was a vice president. He was also, but he had a lot of influence in Congress, and he was just had rotten views, extremely racist.
Right.
But I almost think you kind of want to automatically. I just kind of the biggest sin of American history is slavery, and so
Mm-hmm.
you automatically go to that. And I almost wonder if maybe that's kind of making it difficult to think about someone that maybe wasn't connected to the slave trade or slavery,
Yes.
but yeah, pretty much like, or maybe even some obscure person in the South who owned a bunch of plantations that owned the most slaves.
Right.
I don't know. It's tough. And there's also this stupid thing in history. We always they actually call it great man theory.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how
Where
we're
it's like
always
one figure made this big change rather than, a lot of things going on in society. The
and
nuances of how a society works, I guess.
and really, yeah, that's just very. There are exceptions. I think you should highlight certain individuals. I always say George Washington because I think single-handedly he was the biggest reason why we became a country. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, not a perfect person, obviously, but I think he was our best president. Uh, so I just think also the thing is even when there's somebody rotten like Andrew Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
there's still some good qualities there too.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me just to demonize someone completely, even unless it's like Hitler, obviously, or Stalin. Those two are pretty easy. Pol
Mm-hmm.
Pot's pretty easy to demonize.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful we've never had to deal with that. These brutal dictators in world history that, whew, we
There's
got lucky with
also,
that.
yeah, absolutely. And there's ones that, with the great man theory kind of thing, or like looking at presidents and all that. I was reading this book on like I do this thing in the back end of Patreon, where I've been, I try to read books that are kind of go a little deeper on a topic that we maybe kind of touch on, on the YouTube. And the one that I started reading that I still need to upload the final bit of is about the kind of history of the Supreme Court. And there were a lot of really sketchy characters on the And maybe, it's tough because like a lot of them were driven in a certain direction, like we were talking about because of what was going on in the world and society. But a lot of them really helped push things in a way that really hurt the average normal working person. Like a big part of that book is about labor laws, and they go into
Mm.
he goes into this really elaborate detail about what it was like to work in a bakery in New York in the like
Lochner versus New York.
that's what it is, the Lochner
Yeah.
era. Yeah,
Yeah.
reading about the Lochner era. So there's people like that who are maybe less talked about who it's not you're right. It's not one person, but it's maybe it's a thing going on that gets pushed in a certain way that is bad for a lot of people, and that's
Okay, now you got to tell me the name of that book.
it's called Injustices.
Okay, I got to check this one out too.
Let me get the guy's name. I mean, if you just put in Injustices.
Give me more of your liberal propaganda.
I mean, yeah, I definitely the Rick Perlstein books are really interesting if you're really wanted to go to beat by beat in those eras of American politics. His stuff is really good, and he draws out all these details that are really interesting. Injustice is the Supreme Court's history of comforting the comfortable and afflicting the afflicted. So that's his what's this guy's Ian Millhiser. Yeah. I mean, the thing about that book is he gets really, really good on some of this detail about what life was like for some of these people. There's a big part about child labor that really should be taught at schools because I did not know the extent to which that was such a part of American life. I mean, this is normal people. This is like what a lot of normal people were going through at the time. Yeah, I love getting details like that of trying to get into what it was really like during those times for not just again the great men, but the average person.
That's why I like making whenever I make a Supreme Court video, I have my series Supreme Court briefs that I try to frame it around the person that's in the case. Like the Scottsboro boys, the case is actually Powell v. Alabama, and if you just read Powell v. Alabama, like the briefing of it, it's like a. But if you looked at the whole story of the Scottsboro boys, have you heard of the Scottsboro boys?
Yeah. I'm fishing in my brain to try to remember what the actual case was.
Yeah, like just they were a group of boys who African Americans in Alabama and the 1930s. Talk about not a good place and time to be in if you're African American. And they are accused of raping. Oh gosh, I said the word. That word.
Yeah.
To young white women. And anyway, they're. I mean, it's pretty obvious they never did it. They were innocent, but
Right.
they were the mob almost lynched them and said that they were guilty. They were essentially guilty until proven innocent the whole way through. And the Supreme Court actually ended up being on their side, but the lower courts all were not on their side, and they kept getting retrial after retrial. But yeah, like you kind of follow their struggles, and then you connect with them, and then you're like, okay, I can relate to this. What if that happened to me? So that's always the best way to teach history for sure.
Absolutely.
I feel like this is too serious of a conversation. This needs to.
Well, hey,
topics here, man.
These are the things I wanted to know.
Where are your sound effects at? Gosh,
I know.
Sniffing.
I know. I got to figure. You know what? If this would be an amazing feature. If you could put samples into StreamYard somehow, like have a sample pad, and you could like play sounds at each other through that would be kind of cool. Maybe they could, or maybe that's I don't know. Maybe that's I don't know. That's too much for a streaming.
Probably could just find a soundboard on a browser and play it from there.
Yeah, but the thing that I'm wondering is because if I played mine, I don't think it would go through to you because it would have to go over. I don't know.
It'd have to be me doing it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you're more professional, the one who has experience with these sorts of things.
Exactly.
All right. Is it my turn?
Yeah, I think it's your turn.
Okay. Actually, this is a perfect segue. My next question is yeah, like the sound effects that you find, you play, some of them become iconic almost.
Mhm.
Like you use them like, call a crackhead, like
Yeah, amazing.
do you find yourself like just saying these sound effects around the house, in the shower, to the person next to you on the bus all the time? Like are they always in your head?
Yeah, they definitely are in my head, and a lot of people say that like you know what I get a lot is like my significant other, my husband or my wife is getting really pissed off because I keep saying sniffing or whatever, you know?
That's on YouTube.
That's on
Seriously.
YouTube.
Mrs.
Yeah.
Beat, she would say that to you. Yeah, she's like, "Why are you saying these random things around the house?" Like,
Exactly. But you know what? They that like, I don't know. I think they're funny because they're like a shorthand. It's like you don't have to think of something clever to say. You could just say call a crackhead, and it's like you know what you mean. You could throw it in there whenever you can't think of something.
and yeah, for those of you who don't know who R.M. Brown is, like your viewers call themselves the muscular class, and that
Hmm.
started from a soundbite from Charlie Kirk, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's still trying to get this thing going where he calls Trump supporters the muscular class. And like it's not catching on. He'll say this in like a conversation, and you could see the person being like, what is that? But he keeps trying to get this thing into the culture, and it's just not it's never happened.
Poor guy. I do
I-
feel for him sometimes. Yeah, like it's always exciting when you introduce a new sound effect. Like
Oh,
this is going to be stuck in our heads now.
yeah.
But it's good. Yeah. All right. That was a light
Uh,
question to lighten the
No,
mood.
that's a good one. That's a really good one. I should have wrote funnier questions, but let me see. Let me see what I can go with. Maybe I'll just start going down the well, I you know what? Yeah, why not do this? I was going to ask this. I'm going to have to reword this question a little bit, but like, you were a teacher, for what, like high school age kids, right?
Yeah, and middle school too.
And middle
Not at the
school.
same time, but yeah.
I was just wondering what you think about there's kind of these well, PragerU would probably fall into this, but there's a lot of these like sort of misinformation traps online, and then there's people like Andrew Tate who, if you're younger, might seem appealing, but is going to give you all sorts of like ideas that are probably just going to make your life worse. What do you think? How do you deal with that? As a parent too, how do you deal with that? Like nonstop barrage of misinformation coming through the internet.
Well, I think the sad reality is we have a lot of younger folks who don't have good role models in their life, and I always say the more the better for role
Hmm.
models. Like that's why when you say a two-parent household is better, it just means there's more opportunities for more role models. That's all that means. So
Hmm.
whether they're the same, gender or whatever, who cares? Like it's if grandma and grandpa are living with the kids too, there's more role models that are there to constantly guide the kids. If they have
Hmm.
great teachers at school, coaches, yada yada. Well, if these kids don't have that, then they go online to search for role models. They go to TikTok and they
Hmm.
find D bags like Andrew Tate, who I
Right.
don't still know a whole lot about, but from what I can gather, probably not the best person to get advice from. I mean, I wouldn't even call myself somebody the best person to get advice from. So,
Me
uh,
either. Yeah.
yeah, um, so yeah, like I think the best way to counter that is to, um, I think it does start with parenting, and teachers already have so much on their plate, already so much to worry about. But I do think one of the most rewarding things I did when I was teaching is as a coach and then sponsoring clubs, that's where you truly get to connect with kids and kind of develop those relationships. Um, and some of those kids need a lot of attention. You could always tell the ones who weren't getting positive attention at home very much,
Right. Yeah.
and that's the thing. My daughters, they're 11 and 8, and they still need a lot of attention. Like, I mean, like right now, my youngest made me feel guilty tonight for not. She wanted to play tonight, and like, I'm a horrible father for doing this live stream with somebody I watch all the time on YouTube. But
I'm so I'm so sorry. Oh man.
you took me away from my family. No,
I
that was my
know.
choice. But no, like, so I think that it comes down to like, that's why being a parent is so freaking hard. And if you want to become a parent, you need to think about these things like beforehand. Like you have to give them like even if you give them attention that ends up kind of not being the best attention, the most important thing is to give your kids attention, because if you're not giving them the attention, they're going to find it who knows where
Right.
online. So be there, be in their life. If you're a dad and you travel for work all the time, you're never home, go home, or or Andrew Tate's gonna be their daddy.
Yeah,
We don't
exactly.
want that. So
Yeah.
anyway.
No, I think that's well put.
Yeah, well, so you said you don't have kids though?
I don't have kids. No.
Okay. Other than your viewers.
Exactly. The muscular class family.
Yeah, well, okay. It's my turn, right?
Yeah.
Okay, here's what I noticed, like, because I've been on your Discord server.
Mhm.
Check out the muscular class Discord server.
Mhm.
And then there's Beatcord, which is my Discord server. I'm on both, and I noticed there is a difference there. It does seem to be that my audience is a little bit younger than yours. I noticed there's more millennials that on your
Mm.
Discord server. I don't know if you don't realize this, because
Yeah.
like there's a certain, it's a different type of humor. Like,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
then the Gen Z folks, like the Gen Z folks tend to be smarter, by the way,
Mhm.
which is a little scary to me. Like that, like, man, this is the smartest generation. Holy crap! But also, they don't get my jokes as much, and so I'm just like wondering, like your audience is very, and I guess I'm part of that. Is It's very distinct, and it's almost like a high, like it's kind of the same thing with subreddits. I noticed Discord servers are the same way, where it's this hive mind. It's almost like its own personality. And I guess my question related to this is like, would you say that your typical viewer is like also a fan of just the same stuff that I'm a fan of, like Tim and Eric Andre, all the Erics I mentioned are like surrealism comedy? Because you do a lot of like you know uh close-ups and
Mhm.
changing like weird visuals.
Yeah.
You raise and lower your voice a lot, which I do that in my videos. It's a weird thing, like, and I don't see necessarily a lot of younger. I'm assuming we're not that far off in age. You don't have to say how old you are, but yeah, like I'm assuming you're a millennial, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Old
so
old millennial. Yeah.
yeah, so that's me too. And so like it's a weird thing. Like, would you say you know your audience? Like, if you could tell, like, okay, let me ask you: do you watch Tim and Eric? Did you watch Tim and Eric?
Yeah, all of that stuff I watch and love. Like all the great comedy. You mentioned Eric Andre too. Eric
Yes.
Andre, yeah, yeah. And like I don't know, like I grew up listening to a lot of talk radio and stuff like that, so that a lot of my sense of humor comes from that. But yeah, that kind of surreal comedy I really like. Yeah,
Yeah, because
totally.
that all came like that was the aughts
Yeah.
and then yeah, it's kind of like we came of age when this really blew up, surrealist comedy, and I noticed that carried over to what you do and a
Yeah.
little bit of what I do. Yeah, so it's interesting. Like today, I don't even know. Like I know I'm so out of touch with Gen Z, but like I
Yeah.
know the humor today tends to be a lot darker. I know that.
Yeah, it does, it does. I
It's like
wonder if
really
they get
dark.
yeah, yeah. It's dark, it's very dark, but there's a lot of, like there's stuff that I really don't get because I am aged out of it, like, sort of anime-related jokes and stuff like that, I have a hard time connecting to. Video a lot of video game-related stuff, I'm just like, I don't I get that there's a meme going on here, but I'm not like it's not like forcing laughter out of me, like,
Mhm.
a lot of and I think that's what's going on there, that there's like a generational divide there probably. But I do wonder if they get because a lot of the stuff that I grew up with was like literally I don't think it's much harder to find if you're, I'm talking about maybe like the very early 2000s or like maybe like even the 90s. stuff that I used to watch, like Liquid Television and Kids in the Hall and stuff like
Oh,
that.
Kids in the
Yeah.
Hall was great.
Yeah, Kids in the Hall is probably like, because that was on. They would put it on all the time on. I think it used to be called the Comedy Channel instead before it was Comedy Central, and they
Mhm.
would play Kids in the Hall all the time. So that sense of humor is just like totally burned into my brain. You know what I mean? Like you probably have the same thing where it's stuff that's not out in the it's not being fed to you on YouTube as much, but if you were our age, it would have been on TV. So that's part of the general uh, generational divide, I think, maybe.
Yeah. It is nice to have younger viewers though that kinda like, I
Yeah,
feel like, I have to go to Mrs. Beat all the time because she's, like, more into the younger lingo.
yeah.
I'm sitting here,
Cap.
like, Googling or I'm going on Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, no cap when they say no cap and bussin' and all that. Yeah, I have to look it
Yeah.
up. What are these hep cats talking about? That's what I have to ask.
Alright, well, sorry to make us sound old there,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
it's your turn.
Okay. All right. Let me see. Let me see. No. Yeah, some of these I'm just like they might be too boring. I don't know. Are you at all interested in like the secret society stuff throughout US history like I think actually maybe I always thought it was a goof, but the Freemasons and all that stuff, there's some interesting parts of US history where they were kind of prominent. Are you at all interested in that kind of stuff?
Totally,
Yeah.
in fact, my favorite third party in
The
American history.
anti-Freemason party.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
anti-Masonic party. I
Yeah.
still have yet to make a video about them, but it was the first major third party, and it actually they had members of Congress, and their whole thing was like, "Hey, well, you know that old George Carlin bit where he's like, it's a big club and you ain't in it." That was
Yeah.
basically they're like, "Wait, we're not in the club here. Let's start our own club." And
Right.
the thing about the Freemasons is like there's nothing too nefarious about them actually. They were just powerful people that got together and hung out
Mhm.
basically. And so it's the same dynamics you see it in high schools still to this day, like uh the popular kids, the ones who are kind of the next tier, and we have different names. Like when I was in high school, we had the jocks and the skaters and the goths and the yada yada.
Mhm.
Uh, but what it comes down to is politics, power dynamics, and so the Freemasons, like, it was just one of those things where at some point you had people that they were powerful enough, but they weren't still quite in that inner circle of their
Mhm.
club, and they didn't get in for one reason or another, didn't have the all the connections, and so that's and then the thing is. We forget that for the first 2 decades of this country, most people couldn't vote.
Right.
You could
Yeah.
only vote if you had property. It was mostly dudes who owned property,
Mhm.
white dudes, I should say. And
Mhm.
so once Jackson came around, by that time there was more. It was pretty much any white man could vote, and things. So that was also the emergence of like, oh, freaking elites, and the anti-Masonic party. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Is it an anti-elite thing?
yeah. So, all right. It looks like I got 3 more questions for you.
All
Um,
right.
and I don't know what order to go. So, um, yeah, we'll start with the lighthearted one. So, I did notice a musical instrument behind you,
Yeah.
right? Guitar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a bass, right?
Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
bass, and then there's a regular guitar over there. Yeah.
Okay. And then, of course, you play the uh,
Yeah. I think I.
play a little something.
Yeah. I just do jazz. I do kind of free jazz, experimental kind of music with the recorder, and
Reminds me
it
of
the
Anchorman.
Yeah, exactly. I've had this for years, and I thought the color was so cool. It's green, it's bright green and it's transparent, but it's the worst one to have when you're using a green screen because
Oh,
this is the exact
yeah.
color of a green screen, and it vanishes. And I gotta get a
Yeah,
new
it's
one.
just
Yeah.
black. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Paint It Black by Rolling Stones.
Exactly.
Well, but anyway, you seem to know a lot about music. Do you play the bass, or is it just there for decoration?
Yeah, no. I'm a pretty mediocre bass and guitar player, and
Well, you are in
uh
Austin, so yeah, everybody's a musician
yeah.
there. Yeah. Uh,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
love Austin, by the way.
Yeah.
I so yeah, I'm also a musician, mediocre one. Yes, I my brother and I have a band called Electric Needle Room. Uh,
Ooh.
we have songs about all the presidents. That's usually the thing that people listen to.
All right, all
Uh,
right.
but
I'm gonna
anyway,
write that down.
I noticed just from watching you over the last few months, I noticed like obscure music references. Like
Mhm.
you were calling out Greg Gutfield when he wore a Cramps shirt. Like, is this guy really a fan of the Cramps? Or and then you also like referenced a couple other like indie bands, and so I was like, he knows music. So I just wanted to ask you what your favorite music was, since you seem more familiar with underground stuff.
Yeah, good question. What have I been listening to lately? I mean, I do like some pop music. There's some pretty decent pop music, but I like a lot of, I do like some of that stuff, like the Cramps, and I grew up listening to a lot of that kind of like the Ramones,
Mm,
obviously, like pop stuff that's really catchy and pop like that. But I like the cool thing is like um, what I what I really end up the music that I really end up liking and listening to is a lot is I'll just go to a record store and see what they recommend to find the more obscure stuff. Like I found this collection of like it's sort of like African, like I don't know, like 60s African psychedelic music. And it's great. Like I love stuff like that. Finding stuff that's very hard to get suggested on Spotify, but it's still like somebody's curating it, so that's what I like. So
mhm.
my phone died, but I wanted to get the name of that African psychedelic stuff. But what else do I like? Uh uh yeah, I don't know. I'm blanking. I always blank when people ask me about movies. I could do quicker, but music I always kind of blank. But
But like you don't have to list bands, but just
yeah.
genres.
Yeah, I like, well, actually what I've kind of been listening to more. I always suggest this on, on my stream and stuff, but so it's the one kind of like magazine that I subscribe to called Wire, and it's basically all experimental music and noise music basically, but
Mm.
I always and a lot of it is almost unlistenable because it's just noise, but some of it they really find like great music that's really hard to find too, and the genre is usually um jazz. Like there's some really good jazz and sort of like what do we call it, like yeah, just different kinds of jazz, like really interesting jazz music.
Avant-garde, maybe?
Maybe kind of avant-garde. A lot of it's like homemade. Like there's a guy whose name I can't remember, but I suggested him on one of the streams who I'd never found, but he did a lot of home recordings in the 70s. You'll find stuff like that, like totally weird, hard to
Mm.
find in Wire. But really, I've really been going really hard on Prince lately, listening to
Oh,
yeah, a lot of Prince and his projects, like Prince infused projects like The Time, and there's a band he basically formed and wrote a lot of the songs for called Vanity Six. They have a song called Not to Get it's Prince.
I
So the
was thinking
song
The Revolution is what I was thinking, but this is a different band.
it's a different band. It's called Vanity Six, and they have a
Maybe it's
song
okay.
that if you heard it, you would recognize it. It's called Nasty Girl. Trying to keep it PG on here, but it's Prince. He's doing the Prince thing. But yeah, and there's a great Prince biography that I started reading called The Beautiful Ones, and it's great because I think you might like it because the beginning is about it's a biography, but he starts out the very beginning of the book talking about what it's like to meet, before he died, Prince, and like the weirdness of going to his compound and the weirdness of what it's like to like go to a musical event with Prince. It's kind of amazing because this guy's he's a very normal guy. He's a real professional writer and journalist and all this stuff, and that's not his world at all. It's great. It's exactly what you would want from a Prince biography of what is it like as just a normal person to meet this ridiculous, over the top megastar, you know.
I did a video about Prince on my other channel, The Beat Goes On, and I also did a video about the Ramones.
Nice.
So you might find that interesting. I never really got into Prince that much, other than his big hits, you know. But
Yeah.
once I made that video, I went deep into his catalog, and I there's just too many songs. He has there's no way like I could physically listen to all of his songs.
I know. He really, in the book they mentioned that he would like stay up all night. Like he literally like probably slept less than the average person or whatever, because yeah, and they found like these rooms of demos, and just he was just constantly making music. And not only that, but he was like the Vanity Six thing, like forming these Prince doing Prince through like another band, you know. So it's like, yeah, he was, and I would suggest anybody. I mean, you know, we've all seen like the Dave Chappelle goofing on Prince and all that, but Prince is a great interview too. Like he's such a like, I don't know, like pure. I mean, you know, he's an entertainer or whatever. He's a person, but he really is. There's some pure spirit to Prince that's like it's kind of fun to watch in an interview. So, but what I was going to ask you, do you have any musical recommendations?
I am a
'Cause I
big
was
power
blank.
pop fan.
Okay.
I had a few years where I listened a lot to emo, but generally it's indie pop is kind of my go-to. Like you know, one of my favorite all-time bands that's from Austin is Spoon.
Mm-hmm.
This that
Yep.
comes to mind there, but band I've been listening to a lot lately is Born Ruffians. They're Canadian. A lot of good
Okay.
Canadian bands. Yeah.
Yeah, there are.
There's I but my all-time favorite band is Radiohead. My second favorite's Weezer. I always Those
Oh,
are the big
wow.
two for me. Yeah, and the thing is that people talk trash about their newer stuff, but I think Weezer's newer music is just as good as their older stuff. With the exception of the first two albums, are kind of in their own league. But yeah, like it's great to see. I mean, I think Rivers Cuomo is like the best songwriter of his generation, and
And
it's
didn't he?
pop.
Yeah, totally. Didn't he go back to college or something? Didn't he go to Harvard or
Oh,
something? Is that
yeah,
true?
that's true. Yeah,
Huh.
he when they first got famous, he wasn't quite sure if he wanted to do it, and because he
Yeah.
didn't like touring that much. Yeah, so
Mm.
he ended up going back to school and went to Harvard and grew a big beard, and no one recognized him apparently when he was there. But
Amazing.
he was on Conan O'Brien once and said that he was on a bus sitting next to this kid wearing a Weezer T-shirt,
Mhm.
and the kid didn't recognize him at all. He didn't realize that he was wearing the shirt right next to him.
Oh
So
my
yeah.
god.
Anyway,
Amazing. Yeah. All right, is it my turn?
it is.
Okay, let me see. Yeah, I have a lot of these sort of like history. Somebody says Weezer is awesome. Oh,
Heck
you know
yeah.
what? Yeah, like you're right. Like those songs are irresistible. It's the same with No Doubt. Like, I mean, I don't know how it came up on my Spotify or whatever, but I was like, these songs are so like so many of the No Doubt songs are so irresistibly like undeniably catchy and well produced that it's like, you know, you know, it's ridiculous to try to say that it's not gonna, you know, get stuck in your head or whatever.
Oh
uh
yeah.
all right, this is a boring. I'm gonna cross this one off because it's so boring. It's just gonna be what made you interested in history. I don't even know why I read, but that's so boring. It's so boring. You know what I did want to ask is like, you've been a kind of a YouTube celebrity for a while. Like, what's it like? What was it like getting, you know, crossing that milestone with the plaque, and you know what stands out to you as or really, I feel like I've learned like interesting stuff about myself from doing this. What have you learned, and like what's important to you about doing the YouTube stuff?
I think like when I was starting to get recognized outside of I mean, when I actually had people that watched me because they just wanted to, they weren't forced to by a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
That was
It's big.
it was unexpected. Yeah, like I didn't know really how to. I mean, imposter syndrome definitely kicks in. You're just like, I don't think it because you want a lot of people to see your stuff. Obviously, it's why a big reason why you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the same time, when it kind of starts to happen, you're just like, why are they watching me? You know, like why are people here watching us right now? It's kind of, I don't know. I think about that all the time. But at the same time, like it's cool to sometimes. I was in Washington D.C. in March with I was actually with former students on it was one of those field trip type deals where a company like bussed us all around DC and everything. It was fun. But I was walking around DC and people recognized me. And so,
Amazing.
yeah, do people recognize you yet?
I've gotten recognized maybe like once at a coffee shop near where I live, and that's about it. Yeah.
What do they do? They do one of the sound effects.
I can't remember what I think so. I think that guy actually did ask me if I could if I was gonna make like a soundboard that people could download or something. So yeah,
Oh, I like
it
that
did.
idea.
It was soundboard heavy, yeah. But that definitely bizarre for somebody to just come up and be
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I know you from the internet." It's pretty. I mean, of course, it's like feeling famous is pretty exciting, but
I
I
mean,
mean,
I was at the gym one time and I was like, "Ugh," like making weird noises, and somebody came up to me when I was doing that and said, "Oh, hey,
amazing,
Mr. Beat." Yeah. So,
amazing.
it's good, but I also get like uh, you'd be surprised. I get a lot of hate
Mm.
online, especially when I start to like share my political views, like I
Oh
do on I
yeah,
do that on Twitter. Like
yeah.
I even did a live stream where I took political tests, and this is exactly where I stand on every issue, and I ended up being a little bit to the left, but not really that far to the left. I
Hmm.
was actually on the right on some issues,
Hmm.
which is interesting.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I think it's mostly I'm not afraid to tackle controversial topics. And so, I made a video about the great replacement theory.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
I got a death threat after that. I had to contact the FBI, and
Whoa.
that was a big deal. Yeah. One of my other friends got a death threat too. Same situation after he made a video about slavery. And you just think like, wow, I mean, I knew it would be controversial, but at the same time, I was like, if you watch the video, it's not like I'm saying anything wild,
Hmm.
it's all backed by academic sources. I always cite my sources, and I always say, hey, if I do have an opinion, I want to let you know it's my opinion, and there's other perspectives, yada yada. You can learn more here, but I guess what it kind of shows is there's a lot of mentally unstable people out there, and they kind of come out, and you hear from them, and so I'm sure
Yeah.
have you gotten any of that yet?
I got a lot of that when I first started the chat. I got a lot of trolls and a lot of because I would do a video that had Tim Pool or Ben Shapiro's name in it. So I think people who were searching for them would find it and they'd be like, it were literally was like, maybe this is helpful, but the first videos that I made were just like, you're an idiot. This is stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. Like that was it. Like I honestly cannot believe that like the opposite happens now, that people watch it and they're like, they actually like it. That's like honestly maybe the most shocking
Well, I mean,
thing.
but the thing about you is that you kind of have this goofy persona, and it's also like, I mean, yeah, you sometimes say, "Hey, this guy's an idiot" or whatever, but at the same time, it's like you you're not malicious, I guess, with it.
Right. And
Yeah, yeah,
it's funny because a lot of that stuff, calling people idiots and all this, it's not, I don't really believe that some people are just idiots or
yeah.
anything like that. Like it's a shorthand, and it's, I'm also trying to do a funny show. So like calling someone an idiot instead of going into a long explanation about like psychology or something, it's just funnier,
Oh yeah,
So
because
that
there's no doubt that a lot of people you react to are actually quite intelligent.
oh yeah,
They're
yeah.
manipulating people is what they're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So definitely not idiots.
And like I'm motivated, in addition to being motivated by money, as we all are, because I got kids to feed. But I'm also mostly motivated by just like curiosity and
Mhm.
like I really want the truth out there. I know that sounds like almost like that's really cringy what I just said, but like I feel like when I say that, I just want to get to the bottom of this. I don't need to because a lot of times I don't have strong opinions on stuff. I think that helps me because I'm like, if I don't have an ideology, I'm just sitting here always just questioning everything and just like taking everything with a grain of salt. I think that's
Mhm.
maybe how all of us should be.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I feel like with you, it's a lot of times you're just like, what you're reacting to is just kind of like the most obvious grifter crap. It's like, it's not like you're not reacting like that debate you showed me earlier that with Richard Wolff and
Yeah, because
like,
it's harder to make comedy out of something like that because they're two basically academics. They're two academics who are
and they're coming
going.
at good faith. They're coming in good
They're
faith.
absolutely
Yeah.
when it becomes bad faith or a scam or whatever or propaganda, then it's like it's so much more fun to make. I mean, it's fun to make fun of that, and it's like then you have an opening to actually like goof on something because you're not just explaining stuff,
And you make
So
fun of yourself as well. I make fun of
oh
myself.
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
thing. It's all game.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I also maybe me and you have a different view of the internet than, the people like Gen Z people like you were talking about because like I don't know, I always when we first probably started using the internet, we saw it as maybe like a novelty, like AOL, these chat rooms. Maybe my friend would come over and we would like, troll people and stuff in message boards and stuff. So we almost like I my beginning of the internet was like basically as like a toy, and I still see it like that a little bit, even though it's clearly much more than that. To come at it as like it's a place to do goofs, it's a place you can learn and like actual knowledgeable people like you can like share knowledge, but it's also like I think you also have the heart of like somebody who feels that about the internet, that it's you can goof around on it too.
it's also how we cope with the absurdity.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
uh, thank you for the that, Andrew, and thanks for the kind words from Michigan. Appreciate that. I see you. Although your profile pic is scaring the crap out of me. I'll
I
have
know.
nightmares
What
tonight.
is that?
Just stare at it for a long time.
It looks like it almost looks like a David Lynch painting or something. David Lynch, yeah, he paints these very weird, creepy paintings, and it kind of looks like that. At first, I thought it was maybe like an X-ray or something. It's very, very weird.
Yeah,
Andrew, you got to
that's
explain that.
that's
Explain that to
horrifying.
us. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I got two more questions for you here. We're
All
on
right.
the home stretch, so and they're kind of serious, but we can. That's okay. It's all right.
That's all right.
So, what political issues do you think are the most important ones to focus on, as far as like what should we putting more of our effort into reforming? What should get priority as far as
Uh,
political issues?
I don't know. Like, I'm just trying to figure all this stuff out as well. Like, I don't want to speak like I'm an expert or some like, political strategist or organizer or whatever. But like, I can tell you like what I think is the most interesting, where there actually seems to be some movement, you know, um, or some real serious movement is with, I think maybe like Gen Z people, but also like people um getting interested in like unionizing and all that stuff, because that's like that feels to me, and from what I understand with my very basic understanding of uh history and all this stuff, is like that's sort of yeah, like when people start thinking of like their everyday lives as political and not just like in a spectacle way, but in a
Mm.
like I have to do. It's basically just becomes part of life. Like in a lot of European countries, it's like that. Like, nope, we're not gonna. Like my favorite story is this guy Matt Brunig talked about this, where I think it was in either Norway or Finland. McDonald's wanted to come in, and they wanted to basically like not work with the unions there because they have a very strong unions in that part of the world from what I understand, and
Mhm.
McDonald's didn't want to deal with the unions, and they didn't want to deal with their pay level and all that kind of stuff. They were like, we're going to do basically what we do in America here. And what they did, and this is like just a different view of politics. This is a different sort of like, normal people doing things politics, is they basically stopped building the McDonald's. They just like left the crap. They left the equipment. They left the stores half built. The truck driver stopped delivering the goods. I think it's called a solidarity strike or something like that across industries. And they were like, we're just gonna
Mhm.
kind of stop building your stuff until you agree to pay them, an entry level McDonald's worker $22 an hour or whatever. And like, I don't know, that kind of stuff is more interesting to me because it's happening right now. It's people just say, we don't let, it's just, there's something way more interesting about normal people saying, we don't like this, we're just going to do something about it. And it seems like there's some
Yeah.
of that going on in the US that could be interesting. It could maybe make positive change.
That reminds me of the German works councils that they have. Have you heard of those?
Yeah, I know a tiny bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, like a lot of companies, I think this is a law too. It has to be this way that they have to have like average workers on their boards.
Yep.
It's not like just rich people with lots of assets that have no stake in it, like
Yeah.
the everyday business.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It really, and that's a big reason why they have better working conditions and higher pay in Germany. Um, stuff like that. Yeah, like we don't even. I only found out about that because I think it was probably some documentary that I saw that in or something. But
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I think labor rights is something that it is good to see that getting more attention. Me personally, I always talk about voting reforms. I'm always
Mm.
stuck on that because I feel like if you don't take care of that, then everything else is just gonna be kind of
They're gonna
stuck.
yeah. And they're
You
gonna
know,
that's interesting to see what's been going on with that, with voting rights, and just like voter suppression and all that stuff is pretty terrible. I am kind of interested in the idea, and there's people a lot, that I pay attention to, and like stuff in the news that I've been looking at, people talking about, and they were talking about this sort of when like Bernard Sanders was running for president, was just this idea of like what a political base is, and like what a political base wants, and what they can do to influence politicians to solidify what they want into law and all that stuff. So I'm interested to see like how in the future, you know with people, working people today, but also like the Zoomers who are growing up now, how what if they're going to be able to maybe put more pressure on politicians, or have this base that's going to be more about, yeah, things like that, like vote, they're going to really pressure for voting reform, for workers' rights kind of stuff. Is I'm interested to see if that happens.
I mean, part of that's also like the Citizens United case,
Yes.
Supreme Court
Yep.
case, which, in my opinion, actually, I people don't like it when I say this, but I do think the court actually technically got that right. It doesn't
Hmm.
mean that it should be that way. I think that we should literally amend the freaking Constitution to
Hmm.
make it so that money can't just buy politics. Then I was actually crazy enough. Part of the reason why I was inspired to reach out to you is because I was on Destiny's stream one day.
Oh
You know
wow.
Destiny, right? The
Yeah.
legendary.
Yeah.
He was there before Hassan. And speaking
Yeah.
of Hassan and Vosh, I think what I like about you compared to those two is like you're just nicer. Like, I mean, they could be kind of mean.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was chatting with Destiny about this very issue, and he
Hmm.
was just like, I don't think that money really, like, because if you look at somebody like Bernie Sanders,
Hmm.
a lot of his support was grassroots.
Hmm.
And so you can still break into the game, without all the money behind you but my counter argument to that was like, yeah, but I mean, Sanders was part of the establishment.
Hmm.
People forget that he had been in the Senate for decades when he
Hmm.
finally became a household name and ran for president in 2016. So
Hmm.
yeah, like there's a certain, like, there's just a lot of people that I think they can't break into the mainstream because they literally just, there's not the money.
Money. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean
Cha-ching,
that
cha-ching.
that's one of the big like critiques that that I mean that's yeah, that's one of the just big critiques of our government is that like without money you can't even you can't even run, you can't get enough attention, you cannot get people to vote for you. Like money does really run the game. I mean, you can't do it without money and a lot of money. So it's like, it would be I honestly like all this stuff. I'm so interested to see what like the alternate history version would be where stuff like Citizens United is just we never come close to that where it's just like it's and even like maybe there's laws well it's just like because there's all these different kind of things that people like Kirsten Cinema is a good example of somebody who's just like really started doing the just more openly doing the work of donors and stuff like that. So it's like yeah, it'd be just really interesting to see what society would be like if that kind of thing was just like not at all
Yeah.
allowed or not at all a factor.
Like everybody had the same amount of money to work with for a campaign. That would be fascinating to see that actually in
Yeah.
action. Yeah.
And the other thing that I was thinking about too is like, our government is really, I think, and I think both sides are guilty of this, of like spectacle, like doing spectacle instead of what almost as celebrities, instead of what would be so much more interesting, which is like, no, they're actual public servants. Like
Yeah.
they're actually like, oh, my life is a little bit better. Like this whatever credit card company can't rip me off. This insurance company can't rip me off anymore because they went in there and said you can't do that. They actually regulate housing is easy to find, like in every neighborhood there's an affordable housing with its mixed income kind of stuff like that, stuff that like for normal people the idea of a group of public servants who's like quietly just we just notice, oh, my life's a little bit better and they did that would be much more interesting to me than like, oh, they're yelling at each other in the House of Representatives. There was almost a fight, like that thing. Oh no, oh, that one that I like is talking to the other one that I don't like. Oh, it's
Oh, it sounds like it turning into Jerry Springer.
yeah, exactly. So
Uh,
yeah, whatever. Okay, sorry. There's a
no, there's the explanation that you craved. So thank you again, Andrew.
is a swamp booger.
I
What is that? Do you know what that is? Do you know what he's
Nope.
talking about? Oh my god.
Nope,
Well,
not at all.
maybe it's some kind of it could be some kind of an animal or something. You guys are awesome though. I wonder
Have you heard of the Keating 5 scandal? I've heard of it. I don't know much about it, but I will look into that, Andrew.
the Keating I do know what that is. Hold on. That definitely
It'll,
rings a bell. No, that was key.
I'm sure Alexa knows.
Contributions. Yeah.
She always knows.
I know. Yeah, no, this sounds familiar. I know I've read about this. I just don't remember all the details.
I'll add that to my list as well. Things to check out.
Yep, John McCain was involved. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I do remember this. I remember them talking about this in the news. I just don't remember all the details. Yeah.
We're almost let's I think it's your turn. Yeah. We got a couple more for or one more maybe. I don't know.
yeah, maybe one. Maybe we should just do one. I guess I kind of maybe asked about this, but I wanted to, as a historian, I think a lot of people who are interested in U.S. history are maybe interested in like the westward expansion stuff. I mean, what do you have to say about that? About maybe like the ideal of America, of a place that you could go and like have a small plot of land and not be ruled over by a king or whatever. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? Like theory of history or early American history? This sort of like I don't know, very sort of like the place where you could like be an individual and rule your own whatever little fiefdom or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's a huge part of American culture. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just owning land.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the right to property. It's goes back to John Locke, and then the founding fathers. Like they always are talking about property. Unfortunately, property also extended to human freaking beings. But
Yep.
but yeah, like actually, this is an opportunity to shout out my Oregon Trail video. We did a video where we drove the Oregon Trail. I dragged my entire family with me in a Tesla. We drove it
Amazing.
because I had never driven an EV before, let alone a Tesla. And we rented one, and we turned it into a video. We drove the entire Oregon Trail, and uh, I learned a lot actually. That I always assumed I knew a lot about the Oregon Trail because I was really fascinated about it growing up. I used to play the computer
Yeah,
game.
that
Did you ever play?
classic game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
see, yeah, we're the same
But
age.
that and SimCity were
Oh,
pretty huge.
I
Yeah.
love SimCity. But anyway, so something that a lot of people don't bring up enough, I think, in terms of westward expansion, is all the free land that mostly Europeans got. So when we talk about stuff like systemic racism today, I know that triggers some folks when they hear that. No, systemic racism doesn't exist. Well, it does, but it's not. It's not. I mean, we don't need to. We can still lift everybody up, rising.
Hmm.
Where they say, yeah, we can all. It's not a zero sum game,
Right.
but a lot of people had opportunities that are just insane to think about today. Like if you made it to Oregon in the 1840s and you were white, you could get 300 acres of land for free. Your wife also could. So you and your wife could have 600 acres of free land in the Willamette Valley. We're talking some of the most fertile land in the entire world. Automatically, you're going to be well off, whatever
Hmm.
kind of agriculture you're doing. And then 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, you're going to pass that down to your son or daughter, probably usually son. And they're going to have, and the land value of all that is going to be, whew, wait, and then
Yeah.
flash forward to today. And you look at old wealth, and I know a lot of old wealth gets lost because it gets squandered, yada, yada. But at the same time, to have that advantage when most of our wealth is just tied to real estate. If
Hmm.
that's the only, it's so connected to the so-called American dream is like
Yeah.
being able to own a home. That's why
Yeah.
it was so important for a lot of the politicians and the mid 1900s in particular, 1940s to the 1960s. They're always talking. Everybody should own a home. Like he was even one of Franklin Roosevelt's second Bill of Rights. The right,
Right. I forgot
yeah,
about that second Bill of Rights. Right. Yeah.
so when we talk about, and then we talk about westward expansion as if this is all land that was wilderness, and of course we always neglect that it was. No, there were people there. Native Americans already were on that land, and we just took it from them. We broke treaties, and so it's. But at the same time, I can still see the positive side to it because there's this spirit that kind of came. When you think about all the immigrants that came to this country, it's pretty cool. Like because they all came here to, with their little dreams, and they wanted to make them. They wanted a better life, and they wanted economic opportunity, and for the first time, they had it.
Hmm.
And other places too, Canada a little bit, yeah, Australia. But so it's not all negative. We shouldn't just only focus on the negative parts of it, but yeah, it really is ingrained in it carries over to today, that spirit of the westward expansion.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That part of I mean that and the Civil War are just like, I could just read about that. And I've always wanted to do something like that, like actually go on the Oregon Trail or like go back. I have family that lives in the Carolinas, and like going through that and like being at some of these, historical places, especially like Civil War locations and stuff is like, I don't know. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's most of the history is back east, I guess. That's kind of
Yeah.
We don't have all
Absolutely.
those Civil War sites out. Probably Texas has some, I bet, right? Like there's you got the Alamo.
We got the Alamo, but that the Alamo it's cool, but it's it's a big tourist trap.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see. It's pretty interesting.
Wow. Glad you're into history. That makes this has made the conversation so much better. I was a little worried about that.
No, yeah,
All right.
I'm glad to talk about it. I'm glad you're interested in it too.
Well, I kind of am. Yeah. I guess we'll end it on this last question I had for you. And again, it's maybe too serious, but hey, before I ask this, subscribe to RM Brown. When you go over there to his channel, if you're a regular viewer of mine, you might be surprised to like, oh, Mr. Beat watches this content. I don't care. It's okay. It's awesome. Check it out.
Yeah.
And it makes me laugh all the time. But yeah, on a serious note here, like society. I ask this a lot to a lot of people, like, what is the big solution that you have for society? Let me help you out a little bit here. Like, it's obvious we have a lot of people that don't really they excuse me. See, I'm choked up about this. They they think that they think for themselves, but they don't. Like we literally we'd have a lack of critical thinking. Is there a way to solve that? Because critical thinking is hard. So, how are we going to do this? Do you have a?
Well, maybe you can tell me what you think about this, because I've been bringing this up as an example, like an easy go-to example on my channel every once in a while, which is like, Finland, right, is always known as like one of the better or the best. It ranks always at the top of education, right? And one
Yeah.
thing I did not know is that they actually do some kind of research. I can't remember what the actual paper is called, but you can read it. And I think, from what I remember reading about, is Finland is actually one of the places where people are least likely to fall for fake, quote unquote, fake news. So to me, that's
Really?
like, yeah, I think I'll find that paper.
It's
But
fake news. What you just said, that's fake news. What you just said,
it
Don.
could be that. Now that'd be a very poetic thing that I just did if that were the case. But yeah, so I mean, to me that seems like the only thing you can do, right? For people to not fall for stupid stuff is for everybody to raise the tide education wise for everybody, and then people will be more savvy, but you be less susceptible to really, we're talking like the PragerU, the worst of PragerU misinformation. That stuff is not going to stick as much, I think.
Yeah.
But um, there's also like I think if people have more time too, like this is something I've been thinking about a lot too.
Ooh.
If people had more time, I think they would be able to learn and read more rather than, because a lot of, I've worked in offices where people will get PragerU videos or Ben Shapiro videos. And if you're just kind of listening to that in the background where you're not really looking at it critically, it'll just kind of sink in. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So people having more free time would probably, in my estimation, probably help too.
All right. So, universal basic income, I see, is what you're for. No, I'm a big fan of UBI. No, yeah, I found probably what you were referencing at the Media Literacy Index.
That's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, this is fascinating. So Finland's at the top, Denmark, Netherlands right behind, Sweden. What a surprise, right? All these.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wonder, a lot of these studies, it's good to get into the actual bare bones, like how did they conduct the study and all that stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised if this were the case. I mean, if you have a society that really, I mean, their teachers in Finland, like I know you're like you're to me a very serious academic, and you have a master's degree and all this stuff. I think like to be even a grade school teacher, you need like that level of education to be a teacher in Finland. So they really want people who are going to like put into these students' head like this kind of critical thinking. So I'm not shocked that they rank that high for media literacy. You know, I mean, it seems pretty simple. I mean, you're not going to get everybody, but the percentage is going to be higher, you know?
So yeah, it's as simple as teaching media literacy skills,
Yeah.
which you're doing. You're critically thinking when you do that, because I mean, critical thinking. The definition I always give of that is like it's you're given an argument or claim,
Hmm.
and you're just trying to determine if that claim is true, if it's mostly true, partially true, or false. So you're just kind of going through and there's different tools to do that. Um, but yeah, it's a long, arduous process, and so
Hmm.
like you said, you make up a really good point that I hadn't really thought too much about. Is like a lot of times people are just so busy grinding it out, working 2 to 3 jobs. Like, by the way, what's your like? I imagine you don't just YouTube. Like, you have other jobs, right?
Yeah, my main thing, I mean, that people can probably tell, I do less of it now. I'm more of like sort of a contract worker now, but my main thing is video editing.
Ah,
So I do like video editing jobs for like ads and stuff like that.
nice.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you do. Sorry to keep like boosting your ego, but your videos are well edited.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. uh, so I'm just trying to boost your confidence, RM. That's what
Well,
I'm
hey,
trying to
I'm a
do.
fan. I'm a fan of yours too. Yeah, I think you're doing something that's like, you know, really, really valuable and really like. I was happy to hear that you have a lot of young audience members because it's cool to have like a teacher who's like actually interesting and cool and like passionate. You know, it's like you know, most people only have like a couple of those when they're growing up. You know.
I appreciate that. A lot of my students thought I was pretty lame, though. Are these two guys dating? Mr. Beat is taken.
Oh
Uh,
man, shade
oh yeah,
audience.
I love putting up comments that make fun of me. Oh, and Mrs. Beat is freaking amazing. Thanks for the shout out there, Lisa. She's my support system. Anyway, uh, I forgot what I was saying, but yeah, like media literacy. That's a great thing to kind of end
Oh,
on too. Uh,
absolutely.
so before we go, I guess you want to promote anything like
Yeah, I mean, just if you can, if you're so inclined to do so, I would be honored and amazed if you followed me on youtube.com.
it's on YouTube.
That's on YouTube. That famous quote, that's on YouTube. Uh, yeah, it's RM Brown, and I've been I upload every day, but two of the Tuesdays and Thursdays are behind a Patreon paywall. So if you want to support the show, you get extra videos. That's pretty much it.
Ooh, you
And I
capitalist.
do all kinds of stuff behind the Patreon actually. So
Yeah.
yeah.
RM can do no wrong. Yeah, I told you. I watch your stuff. Yeah. So thank you for being on here tonight and spending your Sunday evening here. And audience, thanks for being here as well. Join the muscular class.
Join it.
Grief gone. I love that username. Grief gone wild. That's great.
Grief gone wild. Interesting. I want to know a lot of the backstory to a lot of this stuff. The avatar, the guy with the weird avatar, grief gone wild, all this stuff. There's a lot going on here.
This is great. We have great audiences. All right. Well, that will be a night. And thanks for being here. And toodles. Bye bye, as you say. All right.
But